Hello everyone, my name's Sean Presley. I decided to do a video presentation for this report because honestly, it sounded a lot more enjoyable to do than typing out yet another history essay. And I hope that for you, the viewer, that you agree. Talking through the book felt like a better way for me to share my thoughts and hopefully a more enjoyable experience for you. So the book that we're talking about today that we read was Megan Elias's Food on the Page, Cookbooks in American Cuisine. And as you can see, I have my copy here. So Elias makes the case that cookbooks are more than just recipe collections. She says, quote, "Cookbooks are full of words about food, but they don't really tell us what people eat." Unquote. What they do show is how people imagined food, how they understood their culture, and how identity and authority were built around the kitchen. Cookbooks, in other words, are historical documents even when they seem ordinary. So this book was organized chronologically. Elias begins with the earliest American cookbooks of the late 19th century, which reflected domestic authority and national pride. This actually reminded me a lot of both my grandmother's and my great-grandmother, where they were the commander of the kitchen and everything in the household revolved around what was happening there. Elias later then moves into the early 20th century, showing how industrialization and new technologies led to standardized recipes, which included precise measurements and the language of science within the kitchen. She then devotes an entire chapter to Julia Child, who turned cooking into both an art and something accessible to the everyday household. The chapter that really stuck with me, though, was the one on oppositional appetites, particularly the section about commune cookbooks from the 60s and 70s. These books weren't just about food, they were also about building communities and resisting mainstream consumer culture, particularly gourmet culture. They featured simple, hearty recipes designed to be shared, and reading about them made me think of my own childhood. So I was born in 1971, and I grew up here in north central Texas. This area has always been a melting pot for food, particularly with Americana food, soul food, Mexican food, Asian food, and southern comfort cuisines. Now my family, we didn't live in a commune, but our table was full of communal style food. We had a lot of casseroles when I grew up. Tuna casserole, enchilada casserole, King Ranch chicken casserole, this Asian green bean casserole my mom used to make. We also ate a lot of stews and soups and chili. And my mom made tuna fish salad all the time for sandwiches. These were our regular meals growing up. Now most of the time these meals, they were just for us. Initially it was my mom and my brother and I, and then later my stepdad and whenever his children would come visit us, my stepbrother and stepsister. But they also extended outward beyond just us. Whether it was holiday gatherings or other family events where we came together, when we had the occasional church potluck, or later when I was in high school, team meals before big games. This is how we lived, communal cooking and communal eating. These dishes, though, they may have seemed ordinary, but they carried a culture that lasted throughout my memory. Elias then looks at the late 20th century cookbooks, especially those by celebrity chefs. She describes them as the palette of personality, where cookbooks reflected the chef's brand and identity as much as the recipes. Let's be honest here, we're talking about their egos. She then finishes up with 21st century cookbooks, where she often tells these origin stories, which are those long sections of online recipes we have to scroll through before we can actually get to the recipe itself. These books combine recipes with memoir and focus on authenticity, provenance, and ethical concerns in food. Taken together, the chapters show how the cookbooks evolve alongside broader cultural and social shifts that happen here in the United States. In terms of methodology, Elias, she didn't just read the recipes. She studied prefaces, dedications, introductions, and illustrations. She looked in the notes, in the margins. She even studied stains on the pages, pointing out how these details give us clue to people's everyday lives. She situates cookbooks in a wider context by connecting them to magazines, advertising of the time, and the culture that was built around all this. That's what makes her work in this book effective. She treats cookbooks as part of a broader conversation about food and identity. For me, Elias's argument is that cookbooks show us not just what people cooked, but how they thought about themselves, how they thought about their families, and how they felt about their communities. Reading this book helped me see my own family's food through that lens. Even today, in my household, with my wife and my children, I am the only one who clamors and craves casseroles. Now, to be fair, my wife does share my love for soups and stews. And the reason is because these meals carry forward a sense of memory and identity that links me to the culture that I had growing up and that I like to try to share with my children today. I came away with two main takeaways from this book. First, cookbooks mirror broader cultural shifts in America, from the industrial efficiency to Julia Child's democratization of cuisine to the communal cookbooks that were a form of protest when I was growing up. Secondly, I learned the value of the extra parts of cookbooks, how prefaces, introductions, and stains and scribbles all add to the story of a cookbook. These details show us that the book was really used and what it meant to the people who used them. Overall, I really enjoyed reading this book, Food on the Page. It reminded me that food history is not just about ingredients and recipes. It's about a culture, about creating memory, and about forming your identity. Even something as simple as casseroles from my childhood tell a bigger story, and cookbooks give us the language to understand it. I thank you for your time, and I hope that you enjoyed this video.